I grew up as a child in the 90s, and my days after school were filled with Nicktoons. Flash forward 15 years or so, and I'm browsing the movie section of my local Walmart when I'm hit with the wall of nostalgia. Sitting on the shelf is a complete series of Hey Arnold. I have a shitty job, however, and they wanted $20, which in my mind just translated to just 2 hours of work. I decided to be incredibly cheap and instead go home to YouTube some episodes to satisfy my urge to remember when times were simple. It was a mistake I won't soon forget. I got home, popped some popcorn, powered up my laptop, and began the search. With a simple click, every episode lay before me. Satisfied, I began to watch, episode by episode. It was well into the night, and I was about to close the laptop when I noticed a video in the suggested video that simply read, Hey Arnold LE. I'm sure that LE must have stood for Lost Episode or something. I clicked on the video excited to see an episode I had never seen before. At the time, I didn't see any problems. After all, the stories of people seeing terrifying Lost episodes in their favorite shows were just stories, right? When the page opened up, it said in the box that the video had been removed, with the half-assed sorry not sorry frowning box staring at me. Further curious at this point, I scrolled down to the comments section for clues. There weren't that many views, so unexpectedly there were only a few comments. The first two, more or less, expressed horror and confusion as to what they had just watched, but the third comment caught my eye. It was from the original poster of the video, and he explained the video had been removed but could still be watched on his website, and then provided a link. I always had a fear of those, believing they'd be a virus, but pounding curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to click on it anyway. It led me to a site which I can't really remember the name. It seemed typical, basic layout with tabs and ads in the middle, however was a small box to click on with a play arrow. I clicked and the video went full screen and began to play. I began to ease from my paranoia, and sat back as I thought I was about to have a chapter of cartoon memories added to my collection. I had no idea what followed was nothing short of terrifying, and would rock me to the very core. The video started out with a simple text that read, What you are about to watch is the creators of the hit show Hey Arnold, intended to be the original series finale. It angered and frightened Nickelodeon executives, and the episode was never aired as such. If you cannot handle disturbing or potentially vomit-inducing imagery, then you are suggested to leave. You have been warned. I was concerned by this, but pushed it away from my mind as the upbeat jazz tempo rang out, and the theme song began. It was introduced as The Furnace. The episode itself started off with Arnold's teacher in the class outside teaching them about chemical reactions, and using them to launch a rocket. Harold expresses he wants to launch the rocket, but the teacher declines, saying that there was no time, and leaves to put up the supplies as the bell rings. It then cuts to Harold, Sid, and Stinky opening the supply cabinet, stealing some rockets and the chemicals, and walking out, vowing to make a big blast-off. It's at this point I began to realize something. The episode looks familiar. I got on my phone and did a little research, and quickly found out that this was an episode that aired in the final season of the show. I was beyond pissed, but decided to watch the show anyway, since I figured my computer was already infested with whatever virus the page carried anyhow. I clicked play again. The boys stole the supplies, and they went behind an abandoned police station to blow the rocket, which, coincidentally, Ernie, one of Arnold's tenants who is also a demolition man, is set to destroy by explosives. The boys launch the rocket, and it goes into the building, which blows up due to the demolition. The boys stupidly believe that it was their rocket that did the damage, thus killing several police officers who didn't know the station was abandoned, and they were now wanted fugitives. This is where things really began to get strange. The video paused shortly. I moved my arrow to reveal that indeed the video was still playing. Soon it began again, only now the quality had changed. It seemed like a cutover. Stinky knelt on the ground, crying, exclaiming that he should go to the police. Harold berates him for this, claiming that they'll be sentenced to the death penalty. "We just killed the police, you idiot!" he screams, clearly angry. I should add at this point that I have become confused and uneasy. I'm a die-hard fan of the series, and I can't really recall any of this. The scene continues as Stinky begins to walk off, sobbing, claiming that he's going to find the nearest police officer and tell him what happened and that it was only a mistake. Harold becomes enraged, as he often does in the show, but this time he charges Stinky and tackles him from behind. Stinky begins to put up a fight, but is no match for the much larger boy, especially since he is face first on the sidewalk. "Sid!" Harold yells. "Help!" Sid runs in front of the action, clearly confused and scared, and asked what he wanted to do. "The rock! Grab it!" Sid looks down as the struggle continues, and sees a large rock laying by a dumpster. He hesitates. "Do it!" Harold commands, "or I'll pound you." Clearly terrified at this point, Sid picks up the rock. You can see Sid's eyes grow large and the resistance set in, as Harold says, "Okay, Sid, I'll hold him while you bash his skull in with the rock." Sid can't move as Stinky laid there with a scraped up face from the struggle, desperately begging for his life while sobbing uncontrollably. Harold begins to plead to Sid and tells him if Stinky got away they would never see their parents again. "You mix the chemicals, you're just as responsible as I am," Harold screams. "Kill him." Sid drops to his knees, brings a rock above his head, and begins to bash Stinky's brains in. He closes his eyes, tears flowing out of them, and then screams, "I'm sorry," over and over, and all the while continuously smashing Stinky's head in with the rock. He brings the rock down one last time, sits back, chin tucked down in pure guilt as Harold breathes heavily, finally able to rest on top of the lifeless body below him. They sit there in a moment of silence with Sid simply whispering, "I'm sorry." They hear police sirens in the background, and not knowing it's unrelated to them, Harold begins to panic. Sid, still crying, begins to ask frantically what they should do. Harold says that they need to get out of there, and they throw Stinky's body in a dumpster and hightail it out of there. Stinky's blood still freshly pooled in the alleyway sidewalk. They run until Sid sees to be with their salvation, Arnold's house. They climb in through a window and then drop into the basement. They scramble around and hide when they hear the door at the top of the stairs open. Harold hides behind some boxes, and Sid hides behind the stairs. He sits with his knees up to his chest and head between his knees as if broken. Arnold comes through the door, exclaiming to his grandpa that he's going to go do some laundry, and begins descending the stairs, not knowing that he is not alone. He reaches the end of the stairs, and hears something behind him. He turns to find Sid standing there crying with his head between his knees. Arnold appears confused and a little on edge. "Sid?" Arnold asked. "Is that you?" "We killed him, Arnold," Sid said softly in a whimper. "We killed Stinky and left his body in the garbage. No God will forgive us now." Clearly in shock and scared out of his mind, Arnold is unable to call for help. Then he hears it. Footsteps approaching from behind, and then rage-induced breathing so close that he can almost feel it as the footsteps cease. He turns slowly and stares into the eyes of Harold, who beams down on him with irritation and anger. It changes scene to Arnold being tied to a chair with duct tape around his mouth as you hear the upstairs door opening. You can see the fear in his eyes as muffled screams desperately try to escape the tape. Grandpa comes down the steps and, probably due to some senility as often played in the show, believes Arnold's just playing a game. He talks about the game and he laughs as he exits out of the door, laughing about the imagination of youth, as Arnold struggles against his restraints and mutely screams for his life to deaf ears. He has no idea it'll be the last time he will ever see his grandson alive ever again. Just playing a game. Out of the back, you can see the boy exit from the staircase. It cuts to the point of view of Arnold as he stares into the dimly lit basement. Sid and Harold enter in the shot from each side and stare down at Arnold. Sid looks scared as he shakily asks Harold what they will do. Harold looks at Arnold with the same angry look on his face and says, "I'm sorry, Arnold, but no one's sending me to jail." The screen goes black. It opens up with a down shot of the basement as Harold closes the door to the furnace. The chair sits empty now, with the rope cut up and lying on the floor. Some blood is on the chair and the floor around it. Sid kneels on the ground, absolutely crying. "How could we do this? They were our friends." Harold appears to feel a little guilt as he explains it to Sid that they had to do it or else they would have been locked up. The next little bit is to show a mashup of Sid crying, Harold pacing wondering what to do, and Sid looking at a knife of Grandpa sitting at the workbench with almost a look of acceptance on his face. It's then you can hear a slicing sound, and worried, Harold rushes over to look beside the staircase. There, leaned against the wall, is Sid with his throat slit in a gruesome suicide. Harold looks at the scene in shock at first, and then spiteful determination as he claims to his dead friend, "Fine, I'll do it alone then." He then hears a loud conversation coming from upstairs just beyond the door, and worried that it might be someone inquiring about Arnold, he sneaks up the stairs to listen. But no mention of Arnold is made. Instead, he hears Ernie bragging to the rest of the lieutenants that he had blown up an old abandoned police station that day. It took a minute of Harold's dull mind to register it all. Then the tears began. His head flooded with guilt as he realized he murdered 2 of his friends that day, and lost another, simply due to a misunderstanding. He walked down the steps and sat on the last one, and hung his head in pure shame. The scene opens up to another over-the-shoulder view of Grandpa as he opens the basement door. He shouts to Arnold that dinner is ready, and gets no response as he notices the chair at the bottom of the stairs empty. He descends the stairs, and when he gets closer, notices the rope and blood surrounding it. He finishes his descent fixated on the chair, and stands next to it, standing in confusion and worry. He double glances around the room, looking for Arnold with his eyes fixated on something a few feet in front of him. It's Harold, hanging from the ceiling, swaying back and forth ever so slightly. Grandpa moves towards Harold in shock, unable to express any emotion. As he nears him, he puts his hand up to touch Harold, almost as if to ensure that what he was seeing was real. Before he touches Harold, he notices something behind the boy and to the right, a folded-up piece of paper taped to the furnace. He approaches the furnace slowly, afraid to find more horrors, and retrieves the note. It simply reads, "Aren't you glad that it was just a game?" The camera cuts to the inside of the furnace, fading out, which is pitch black and the door is closed. You can see parts of Grandpa through 3 rectangular holes that act as a vent. The furnace latch unlocks loudly. The door creaks open slowly. Grandpa's jaw closes, and he begins to quiver as he stares at what laid inside. The only hint given is a hand with a sleeve the same color of Arnold's shirt pulled up, and his hand and sleeve slightly covered in blood. You see the look in Grandpa's eyes as he presumably looks upon his only grandson, the only remains of his long-deceased son, as he lay mutilated in the furnace. The video cuts to black. I closed the window, slammed my laptop shut as a small part of my diminishing childhood died. Everything was normal after that. I never researched the video or tried to find it again. I didn't really care to, as I figured it was a lousy, albeit disturbing knockoff, made by some overweight nobody in his mother's basement. After a couple of weeks, however, I decided to buy the series, determined to not let my childhood be destroyed by one incident. Sometimes my internet connection was shoddy at best. I began to watch episode after episode until I came across the one in the last season. It was entitled On the Lam, and it was the episode the knockoff was based on. Or vice versa, perhaps. I didn't remember much from the episode, but as it played, I remembered feeling disturbed. The similarities between the two were gut-wrenching. I mean, the episodes were the same until the police station was blown up, but even after that, they were still eerie parallels. Firstly, after the explosion, Stinky was the only one who suggested going to the authorities. Next, Arnold was being tied up in his basement, completely furnished with workbench and furnace, mind you, by the 3 boys. At the moment, though, he only expressed irritants and slight anger. Then, slightly later in the show, it happens. The scene. The same damn scene. Grandpa enters the basement and talks about the game Arnold is playing. But it's obvious to anyone who is not crazy that Arnold's not playing a game, and the look of irritants on him from earlier is gone. The expression on his face now is nothing short of pure, heart-pounding fucking terror. He shrieks the way only a 9-year-old knowing death upon him can, but once again is smothered by the duct tape as Grandpa closes the door, darkening the basement once again. Except no one dies in this version. It was as if the scene had been left there, cut short and repurposed for the children's version, and it made me wonder if the video could honestly be true. If maybe the show's creator, infuriated by the cancellation of the show, initially had a much darker ending planned but for the blonde-headed boy with the football-shaped head. Later, Arnold comes crashing through the basement door and begins explaining everything to his grandpa. But in the back of my mind, I think, that's not Arnold. Arnold is still in his basement, dead in his furnace. And that, my little shadows, was Hey Arnold, the Furnace. A Hey Arnold lost episode creepypasta. My final thoughts on the story? Pretty good, to be honest. A pretty good creepypasta nonetheless on Hey Arnold that I found to be particularly interesting. However, even with that being said though, I did find a couple of issues within the story that I think do need to be mentioned. But let's start off with the positive sides of the story. For one, the actual episode itself. I love the fact that how this was this was an alternate episode, more or less, of the episode, well, the Lamb, with I mean, I've never really seen the episode, to be honest. I think I maybe have seen a clip or two of it. Never really was too crazy about Hey Arnold. I mean, I like it, don't get me wrong, but still. Now, this episode in question, more or less, was really well made, very interesting, and very well completed. I liked it a lot. I love the fact that everything just more or less ended out with tragedy at the end, and basically just kind of had that eerie feeling of, like, Arnold's grandpa finding Arnold's dead body in the furnace. I mean, pretty freaky if you ask me. Now, another thing that I also genuinely liked about it was the fact that it was definitely something I wasn't exactly expecting. I mean, I've already read the story before, but rereading it again was definitely something I wouldn't have exactly expected to be, this good. And it's really, really, really good, actually. I enjoyed it. Now, with that being said, do I have any negatives with the story? If I really had to say a negative within it, it's really just with the major beginning of it. I mean, I honestly can say that is... I mean, I understand why it was done, but it's still pretty cliche, though, that the story itself kind of went into the whole, the video is gone, it's on another website, viruses, things like that. I mean, that kind of thing's been done almost to death at this point. I mean, it's not really anything particularly original or new or anything, and, that's just kind of a bit of an issue I have with the first start of it. It just seemed like, something that more or less... would have just been a complete turn-off to a lot of people. Which, really thinking about it now, if there really could have been any improvement to this, is pretty much the first beginning, because that's the number one thing that you want to use when you want to hook your audience. You always want to have that, you always want to have that hook at the beginning of the paragraph in order to really get people to want to keep reading on more. I mean, if people are just going to sit there and read the first part of it, they're probably going to lose interest, lose faith in it, and just click off of it. I mean, that's the number one thing that you always have to keep up with. You always have to have a good beginning, and you always have to have a good ending. If you have neither of them, then obviously you're going to have a really hard time having people liking your story, or they might even flat out hate it. Now, of course... it's a good thing I actually kept reading this, because this was a story that, despite its not so good start off, the rest of it was amazing. But, like I said, if improve the first beginning part of the story, and, people will want to go and read more of it. But of course, like I always say, this is simply my own personal opinion, and if you disagree with it, that's perfectly fine too. We're all entitled to our own opinions in regards to these creepypastas, and this is simply my own personal thoughts. My final rating of the story would have to be I'm going to give this one a 9 out of 10. Mostly because of the fact of the matter that, despite the beginning story being rather cliched and just kind of like a bit of a turnoff, the rest of the story played out well. It was very interesting, very intriguing, and just downright beautiful for a story. But of course, like I said, there still needs to be extreme improvement with the first startup of the story, but overall though, the rest of the story was absolutely amazing. But what did you guys think about this creepypasta? Did you guys enjoy it? Did you guys not? Also, what would you have personally done to help make the story a lot better? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments section below. I'm the Shadow Reader. Thanks again for watching today's episode, and like always, roll the outro because I'm out. In fear and surprise, as your eyes widen, your mouth goes dry with each battered breath. You try to scream, your mind begs to leave, glued to your computer screen. The killers they slash, the tapes burn and crash. The cartridge you bought will be your final haunt. The rituals of hate will seal your fate. The tears you shed will be from the fear-gripping horror-driven nightmarish gore-filled, terrorizing, hateful, burning, violent, rage-inducing, knife-slashing, blood-splattering, silent screams. Only time will tell if you will escape this online hell. Your horror-filled obsessions will come with its own regressions. Your pathetic screams will not be heeded in any way, because your nightmares will come at any day.